You all know what they saw. They saw what we saw. They saw the frail elderly man who needed help getting off the stage. They're just too chicken shit to tell us about it because they accurately deduced that he could still be the Democratic nominee and they don't want to ding him up. Maybe you give Barbara a pass. Who gives a damn what this singer saw or says? But you know what? Jimmy Kimmel happens to be employed by ABC, which happens to have a rather large news organization. And he has been one of President Trump's most vocal critics. Where are you, Jimmy? On vacation? Not good enough. You can still use your thumbs to send out a tweet. You could set the record straight right now, but you won't.
What happens when Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly tag team roast duty and Jimmy Kimmel becomes the unlucky piñata? It stops being late night comedy and turns into career CPR with ego-crushing zingers and spicy truth bombs lighting a 3-alarm fire where Kimmel's the marshmallow. This isn't a normal celebrity feud, but a full verbal demolition derby, and whatever he said to set them off makes the fallout messier than a social media meltdown.
Yeah, all of a sudden the ideology shifts because so many people are compromised by this very thing that we were talking about before. The very thing that they use to control the media in terms of the news, they use it to control the media in terms of late night talk shows and monologues as well. It's the same influence because they're the same sponsors. The same people are spending the same money on the same networks. And it has an impact. If it affects your livelihood and affects your future and your ability to do this thing that you love doing, which is hosting a talk show, and you're doing it on a network that is paid for by that money, guess what? That affects you.
Once upon a time in the land of late night TV and curated sincerity, Jimmy Kimmel was the jester-in-chief, a guy running beer-chugging bits and bikini bounce houses, but fast forward, and he's been recast as Hollywood's moral sage, clutching pearls over grand ethical crises with the same hands that once high-fived fart jokes. So what changed? Because Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly have theories, and they didn't exactly whisper them into the void.
Just this past 2 weeks, they had the Kennedy Center honors the other night where Joe Biden couldn't say Dionne Warwick. He kept calling her Diane, and he didn't know who Barry Gibb was. He kept calling him Billy. You know who else was honored? At the Kennedy Center. You know who else? Billy Crystal. Just FYI, do you know who once opened up the Academy Awards in full blackface?
Oh,
Billy
yeah.
Crystal. Billy Crystal. And do you know who's going to be hosting the Academy Awards this year? Jimmy Kimmel. Do you know who's worn blackface repeatedly and spoken inner city sort of urban accent saying she needs to darn those socks? Jimmy Kimmel as Oprah, as a fat-suited, black-faced, darning socks Oprah. Now, if you are of the left, that's fine. If you are of the right and happen to just say, hey, people used to wear blackface and nobody freaked out about it, you get fired.
First up comes Joe Rogan, MMA commentator, podcasting juggernaut, and a full-time bulldozer against sugar-coated nonsense. He doesn't tiptoe into criticism. He storms in like a caffeine-charged rhino with zero patience for phoniness. And to him, Jimmy Kimmel isn't just a late-night comedian, but an artifact, a relic from a time when comedy actually meant something beyond holding up cue cards of manufactured virtue.
That sort of self-censorship and the idea of being a more empathetic person is a good thing, right? But as long as it's reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, the problem with that kind of stuff is it continues to go in the same direction where more and more things become forbidden and toxic.
Rogan's take isn't about personal beef so much as spiritual offense. When you build a career as the everyman, the guy who says what others won't, watching Jimmy Kimmel morph into Hollywood's moral concierge feels like discovering your favorite dive bar now serves gluten-free kale shots with motivational quotes, a betrayal with a laugh track, where Kimmel's evolution, or devolution, depending on where you're sitting, plays out like an accidental satire sketch, you know.
You know, the Elon Musk joking around about my pronouns are prosecute Fauci. Jimmy Kimmel made a tweet back to him. He said, your pronouns are ass and hole. Which is pretty funny. But then...
Did he really?
Yes. And so then I read that, and there was people saying, please don't joke about pronouns. It's transphobic to joke about pronouns. So they were chiding him for participating in a joke about pronouns.
So Jimmy Kimmel was doing it. He was doing it too.
Yeah, he was doing it too.
The man who once rode the comedy line like a rodeo bull now clutches a polished moral compass that always seems to point conveniently toward applause. And Joe Rogan, ever the bloodhound for authenticity, smells the rebrand from a mile away. It's not a gentle pivot, but a full-blown cosmetic career procedure, where edgy now means recycling the same safe political sermon between jokes cleared by an HR department, while Rogan's world stays messy, chaotic, occasionally unhinged, but brutally real. A place where people clash, disagree, and survive without bursting into moral flames. As Jimmy Kimmel wraps himself in the safety blanket of Hollywood consensus, swapping unpredictability for clout, once sharp, now beige. Like a punk rocker from the 90s rebranded as a Whole Foods ambassador, still telling jokes, but now with disclaimers, waivers, and warnings. Comedy that once landed like a punch, now arriving as a carefully worded corporate memo inside a late-night ecosystem scrubbed, bleached, and gift-wrapped for the algorithm, where risk is extinct, bite is forbidden, and Kimmel ends up playing head babysitter in a daycare of identical opinions.
At the Sunday morning show with Stephanopoulos into the evening Academy Awards broadcast with Kimmel and ABC elevating, the blackface loving Kimmel. They, at the same time, fired Chris Harrison, host of The Bachelor, for trying to defend one contestant on The Bachelorette for saying, gee, I know I went to this antebellum party, a couple years ago. I guess I didn't see anything wrong with it. And all he said was, are we judging her by today's standards, or are we judging her by, old standards, whatever. He was basically trying to say, are we being too hard on her? Got fired. Chris Harrison has to be fired by ABC. I don't know why, because he's not a committed leftist, because he's not out there more saying all the terrible things about Republicans that Jimmy Kimmel says. So this is them saying, we get it. We're an ally, right? And I guess maybe they're trying to make up with their racist past without ever acknowledging.
The man who once rode the comedy line like a rodeo bull now clutches a golden moral compass that always seems to point conveniently toward applause. And Joe Rogan, ever the bloodhound for authenticity, smells the rebrand from a mile away, because this isn't just a pivot. It's a full-blown career Botox injection, where nothing screams I'm still edgy, quite like repeating the same tired political sermon sandwiched neatly between jokes an HR department already signed off on. And in contrast, Rogan's world stays messy, chaotic, occasionally insane, but always brutally real. A place where people disagree loudly without bursting into moral flame. While Jimmy Kimmel, meanwhile, appears to have chosen the safety blanket of Hollywood consensus. What Rogan sees as a man who swapped his comedic soul for Instagram clout, once unpredictable and sharp, now utterly beige. Like watching a punk rocker from the 90s slowly morph into a Whole Foods brand ambassador. Sure, he still tells jokes, but now they come with waivers and trigger warnings attached. Comedy that once landed like a punch, now arriving like a polished corporate memo. And then there's the ecosystem itself, the late night landscape Kimmel operates in, which isn't just sanitized, but bleached, scrubbed, and gift wrapped for the algorithm, where Rogan looks around and sees clones everywhere. Same jokes, same politics, same punchlines, no risk, no bite, until late night starts to resemble a daycare center for ideologues holding cue cards, with Kimmel, unfortunately, sitting front and center as the head babysitter.
Yes, hypocrisy is alive and well amongst these sanctimonious leftists. From Kimmel to De Niro to Stephanopoulos, they want you to believe they're better than you, more virtuous, more decent. But we all know the truth. They lie. They sin. They do the very things they accuse you of and the things they say they would never do. Evil things, like try to destroy people based on feigned outrage, from which they spare their own side.
The media adores a redemption arc as long as you join the choir, and Jimmy Kimmel has practically become the lead soprano. But here's where it gets delicious, because while Megyn Kelly slices apart the PR theater and publicist-fueled apologies, she also exposes the incentive structure underneath it all. Nobody gets a pass because they're sorry. They get a pass because they switched sides. Because this isn't about morality, but market alignment, where morals are optional and loyalty to the approved narrative is mandatory. And that's how two very different critiques collide on the same man, with Joe Rogan calling out the plastic shell where a comedian used to be, while Kelly pulls back the curtain on the empty suit propped up by media consensus. Both painfully right in their own way. Rogan seeing a once genuine voice smothered by studio polish and approval addiction. Kelly seeing a strategic chameleon shifting just enough to survive each outrage cycle, forming the unlikeliest tag team in cultural commentary. One swinging a bat, the other filing a forensic report, missing only popcorn because comedy itself isn't even the real issue anymore. It's that it doesn't even try, as Kimmel, once a boundary pusher, now babysits those boundaries, with monologues less about punchlines and more about proving he did the assigned homework.
They were saying that his tweet is transphobic.
Do you think in that case, do you think that's him or a writer? Can't you tell?
Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
No, it's him, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
good. That's a good one.
He's a comic.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I mean, he used to host The Man Show. I mean, he's done some pretty outrageous shit back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, for hee-hees and haw-haws.
No, that's a good joke on top of a good joke.
Yeah, it's a good joke.
But viewers didn't tune in to be graded, they tuned in to laugh. And somewhere along the way, the jokes turned into sermons, and the punchlines morphed into TED Talks with applause signs, which is exactly the absurdity Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly lock onto. A guy who once embodied irreverence, now selling scripted outrage. A comedian who used to skewer hypocrisy, now carefully scheduling it. No rebellion left, just endless rebranding. And in the great irony of modern media, the more Jimmy Kimmel moralizes, the hollower it sounds. Not because morality is wrong, but because it's so visibly manufactured. Every emotional speech and calibrated outrage, prepackaged for social media, sincerity by committee, and the damage is obvious as late night TV collapses into an echo chamber so loud it can't hear itself, with Rogan watching from his leather-padded bunker of chaos, wondering when comedy turned into a PowerPoint presentation, Kelly observing the same clown car crash from her media war room, and Kimmel stuck in the middle saying nothing, yet saying everything, because his silence now speaks louder than his monologues. A punchline without a setup, a moral compass with a brand deal, a performer in a show almost no one finds funny anymore.
Now, I will tell you, he's not the worst. The Daily Show has the worst ratings. They only have 366,000 people watching that show. During the Jon Stewart years, it was over 2 million. Now it's down to 300,000. Seth Meyers, absolutely dreadful. He doesn't even have 1,778,000. I mean, for network television, this is, you don't have to pay for it. It's there when you turn on your TV. You plug it in. That's a dreadful number. Greg Gutfeld on cable, which you do have to pay for, it has more than double the numbers of Seth Meyers. Jimmy Kimmel, 1.5 million, averaging, also equally horrible.
They didn't even invite him to the roast. They just looked at the act and called it exactly what it is. A sitcom without a script, a sermon wearing a laugh track, an empire once built on irony now selling sincerity at a discount. And suddenly it all feels like a Netflix documentary titled The Day the Clown Cried for ratings, because when Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly both end up dragging Jimmy Kimmel through the same mud puddle, one swinging like a blunt force caveman philosopher, the other dissecting him like she's preparing for a high-stakes courtroom trial, you know something deeper is bubbling under the laugh track, boiling down to a simple and brutal equation, authenticity versus performance, where Rogan's entire appeal is being raw, unfiltered, and just chaotic enough to give PR departments heart palpitations because he never tried to be lovable, while Kimmel went the opposite direction, slowly reshaping himself into a walking press release, his once edgy comedic soul long gone, likely traded for a better hairpiece and a moral high ground with a scenic view.
They want to shut me down on being on McAfee. They want to shut me up from.
Well, that was the Kimmel thing, right?
Well, no.
Did you ever talk to that dude? Have you ever talked to him?
I've been on the show.
Yeah?
Years ago. Yeah.
Would you ever have a conversation with him in person?
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, they wanted me to be on a show in the summertime after I got traded.
Really?
There, obviously been some things that he had said about me that made me go, I don't know if I want to do that. I'd rather.
It's like watching a former punk rocker show up to a PTA meeting in khakis, passionately arguing about gluten-free cupcakes. The guy who once mocked Hollywood has become Hollywood, wrapped in branded virtue and dusted with whatever the internet finds acceptable this week. And from Joe Rogan's angle, Kimmel isn't evolving at all. He's dissolving into a safe, inoffensive puddle of applause-seeking goo, while Megyn Kelly storms in like a corporate HR investigator clutching receipts, unconcerned with whether Jimmy Kimmel used to be funny, and far more interested in how thoroughly he's been repackaged and resold, because to her, the transformation looks way too conveniently timed to be growth, less personal evolution, and more moral Botox, clean on the surface, fake underneath, and needing constant touch-ups to stay relevant, and together they don't just critique the man, but expose the system he now thrives in, dragging us back to the lost art of comedy, back when comedians actually took risks, when jokes made people uncomfortable enough to squirm or rethink what they believed, because those days feel gone now, replaced by comedy that's been sedated, neutered, and parked inside a branded merch store where every punchline needs PR approval and gets sanitized for your safety.
I've got serious questions about whether any of this is true. I mean, in every job I've ever worked, I've had people who would jump through brick walls for me, and I can be a tough boss. I'm not an asshole, but I'll say, like, that was a shitty packet. Like, we need to do better. That was not okay. And the team, my team loves me, and I love my team because we are all about putting out great work product. And I'm quick to compliment too. Like, what did he say? He basically said, "Are you okay? Seriously, do you need help? That's causing people to lose their hair?" People need to toughen up. Your workplace is not your nana's lap.
Rogan sees all of this and bellows into his microphone about it, while Megyn Kelly clocks it with a slow, chilling eyebrow raise. But they land on the same conclusion. We've swapped real laughter for the clatter of audience applause, not because something's funny, but because it's ideologically correct. Comedy recast as sermon with Jimmy Kimmel playing the self-righteous preacher reading from whatever's trending, and the media isn't just enabling this drift, it's begging for more, because the safer, smoother, more elite approved the content, the louder the coverage, and Kimmel doesn't merely survive in that ecosystem. He thrives as the model, the prototype, late-night host version 2.0 with half the edge and double the moral superiority, leaving us at a cultural crossroads where on one side stand Joe Rogan and Kelly, flawed, loud, fiercely independent, swinging at the padded walls of the media bubble, and on the other side the Kimmels, smiling through rehearsed sincerity and polished monologues, floating on public approval like a duck in an absurdly expensive suit, because this isn't just one man losing his comedic backbone, it's an entire entertainment industry forgetting how to laugh unless it's at pre-approved targets. Satire that once bit now settling for gentle nibbles, more tofu piranha than predator.
I don't think that conversation is a conversation that should be held in front of an audience in 5-minute chunks like they do on television.
Yeah.
That's a conversation that you have to let air out. I want to know why you think the way you think. Him, sit down with Jimmy. Why do you think the way you think? Why would you think that it's okay to say that it's a real simple thing? The people that have been vaccinated, you treat them. And the people that took horse goo, rest in peace, Wheezy. Really? Is that really how you...
It's about what happens when comedians stop challenging the powerful and start brunching with them instead. Because once comedy forgets who it's supposed to mock, the punchline doesn't just weaken, it turns tragic. And if you need a visual, picture a clown once famous for flipping tables, now sitting quietly at one, sipping herbal tea and nodding as studio executives tell him how brave he is. While the crowd doesn't laugh, but claps out of obligation, pretending they just heard comedy and not a confession. So yes, Joe Rogan swung the hammer and Megyn Kelly brought the scalpel, but it was never just about Jimmy Kimmel. They were cutting into the same thing, the artificial, calculated, humorless soul of modern media. And the disturbing part is the punchline landed, while the scarier part is that it wasn't even funny, because late night used to feel like a bar at 2 a.m. Chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes inappropriate, but honest. And now it feels like a corporate team building seminar hosted by someone who used to be fun. And if anyone's wondering where the spark went, Rogan and Kelly just handed you the map, because when Rogan, the human Molotov cocktail, and Kelly, the PR assassin, circle the same target, you don't get an interview, you get an autopsy. And the body on the table isn't just Kimmel, it's everything he now represents.
Back in the day when I was on the prime time of Fox and you were on the prime time of CNN, a couple of hours after our shows ended, late night comics would come on, and they occasionally would make us laugh, Pierce. As you know, they've abandoned that game now, and they're just political operatives out there. Look at this.
Hey there. How are you doing? If you watch the show regularly, I'm guessing you're not doing great.
It was a terrible night for women, for children, for the hundreds of thousands of hardworking immigrants who make this country go. For healthcare, for our clients.
It's the culture of fake growth, the illusion of bravery trapped inside echo chambers, the idea that comedy is only acceptable if it flatters the right people. And Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly didn't just humiliate Jimmy Kimmel, they exposed the scaffolding propping up his entire stage, not with rage but with disappointment, sarcasm, and a well-earned side-eye, the kind of ridicule that doesn't shout or need a mic drop because the silence afterward is louder. So the next time Kimmel climbs climbs into his moral lifeguard chair to warn America about the dangers of mean tweets. It's worth pausing to ask whether you're watching a comedian or a commercial for the latest approved flavor of Kool-Aid, because the jokes used to be the point, and now they're just the delivery system for the lecture. And if you're still laughing, Rogan and Kelly leave you with one quiet question. Welcome to the roast that didn't need a stage, just two critics, a hollow brand, and a punchline that wrote itself.